Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
There we go. Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. Time for another problem with the microphone. It's not really a major problem. It's just, it's one of those buttons that's a little sensitive. And sometimes you think it's all the way pressed, and sometimes it's just not. Okay, we're ready to go, I guess. A little bit hectic here in the morning. Tuesday mornings, a little more hectic than usual. There's a little bit of pre-school, early rising activity that has me out driving the high schooler and dropping him at school early for him, but late for me, and usually scrambling to get back here in time for getting on the air. But okay, we're here, and you'll have to excuse the mess, I guess. Anyway, plenty to go over today, and plenty to unravel today. This morning's, I'll have to ask, I should ask Justice for links every morning in his stories as he hints to me, but particularly on Tuesdays when I don't get a chance to look at any news and I see these little dropped hints about things that he's watching, and you can kind of guess sometimes about what they are about. One was about no one ever suspected Elon had a bad childhood, although I feel like we may have heard this story. But I guess there's some particular new one about that. But then this is interesting, intriguing. Florida highways will glow in the dark. I must have missed some radioactivity spill of some kind. I don't know. The thing I saw this morning on Florida that had me guessing was, let's see, and I meant to look it up here too. So we can take a look while I'm talking about it. I saw Jed Legum putting together in his popular info newsletter. Is it a Substack? I don't even know. Let's see. I'll have to find him. And let's see. Can I get him this way? Yeah. All right. And he was listing the stories or the books that had recently been banned in Florida under the guise, of course, of banning porn from Florida school libraries, which, you were probably surprised to find out that the school libraries had so much porn in them. And of course, the reason that he uses that explanation is very few people who are on his side anyway, ask any further questions like, what do you mean? Whereas everybody else who's not on his side are going to ask that question because of course there isn't any porn in the libraries at the schools. What are you talking about? And as it turns out, of course, it was just his dodge. Before there was a list to produce, and people said, "You can't believe you're for book banning. That's so Nazi of you." No, I'm not just banning anything. I'm just banning porn, and everybody knows porn doesn't belong in a school library. And of course, now we find out. Well, what do you mean? What's being banned? What are the books? And here they are, revealed in Judd's popular information. It doesn't say it's a Substack, but it's very much like a Substack. These 10 books are considered pornography in Ron DeSantis' Florida. And he writes on March 8th, way back then, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis conducted a press conference in which he purported to debunk the book ban hoax. I mean, that's why this is actually such a story. The list of books is actually, I don't know. I mean, it's of course the important part of the story, but the overlooked part of the story is how he's been dodging, even acknowledging that he's banning books from libraries. During the event, DeSantis claimed that Florida schools under his leadership were not banning educational materials. Rather, they were simply removing, quote, pornography from school libraries and classrooms, where it totally was, of course. DeSantis claimed the notion that Florida was involved in book banning was a nasty hoax because it's a hoax in service of trying to pollute and sexualize our children. What a line. Removing clear instances, can you believe it? Clear instances of pornography and sexually explicit materials, often within arm's reach of our youngest kids, is not book banning, Florida Department of Education Commissioner Manny Diaz Jr. added. But it is, of course. New records obtained by Popular Information show the reality is starkly different. I can't believe it. Few of the books removed from Florida school libraries were deemed pornographic or sexually explicit, and many books that did receive that label do not meet the definition of pornography or anything close under state or federal law. DeSantis touted data collected by the Florida Department of Education from a survey of 23 school districts that removed books from their libraries. He claimed that, quote, of the 175 books removed across the state, 153, or 87%, were identified as pornographic, violent, or inappropriate for their grade level. That is a very broad definition. Right? They're totally porn, 100%. And if they're not, then they might be violent, or they could be otherwise, quote unquote, inappropriate for their grade level. So, like, it's actually too hard for fourth graders to read because the language is, too, not adult in the pornographic sense, but adult in the it's hard to read and I don't know what those words mean sense. That would be inappropriate for a grade level. And you bolster your numbers because they're not removing any pornography from school libraries or classrooms because there's no pornography in them. So the whole thing was stupid from top to bottom, but more than stupid, it's insidious. Anyway, DeSantis stressed that teachers who distribute pornographic materials, of whom there are 0, to students could and should be prosecuted for a felony. Well, of course, because, pornography, if it's real, you can't give that out in classrooms. But then again, no one is giving that out in classrooms. Unless, I guess there could be a teacher in the public schools who might be, county Republican chair or something, in which case you might find out that that's exactly what they're doing because, of course, every Republican accusation is, in fact, a confession. So, DeSantis stressed that teachers who distributed pornographic materials to students could and should be prosecuted for a felony with the following excerpt, maybe from his press conference. In terms of the pornographic material, there were reports saying, teachers are so worried, they may end up being charged with third-degree felony for having books in their classrooms. Long-standing Florida law says that it's unlawful for adults to provide pornography for minors. Does anybody disagree with that? No, of course not, but that's not what you're doing. I don't think it's ever been appropriate in the history of Florida, or anywhere else for that matter, for adults to be providing pornography to minors. But he's totally doubling down on the upside down and incoherent point. Notably, Judd continues, DeSantis did not release the full results of the survey. Florida Freedom to Read, an activist group seeking to combat censorship in Florida schools, obtained the full results of the survey through a public information request. I don't know why they still comply with those down in Florida. I guess as long as every other part of the government is fascist, they should just stop. But, I'm glad they don't. The full results of the survey reveal that DeSantis' remarks in March were wildly misleading. Wow, I can't believe it. I think it was obvious at the time that they were wildly misleading. By lumping together books that were labeled pornographic, violent, or inappropriate, and then focusing on books deemed pornographic, DeSantis grossly distorts the percentage of books removed as pornography, right? He says 87% of it was pornography or something else that I don't like very much. The survey reveals just 38 books were removed for violating the state's pornography law. I'd love to see what they were and what the hell they said. 22% of the total, which is bad if it's really pornography, but I'll bet you it isn't. Most books were banned for being, quote, inappropriate, which could mean anything. But even the 38 books in the survey officially designated as, quote, pornography include numerous titles that clearly do not meet the definition of pornographic or obscene materials under Florida or federal law. Florida's pornography statute, 847.012, which honestly, knowing Florida man, probably actually says everyone in Florida is required to have pornography, but tell everybody that it's a Bible. Prohibits adults from distributing on school property. And what is prohibited from distribution on school property? A, any picture, photograph, drawing of a person or portion of the human body which depicts nudity or sexual conduct, sexual excitement, sexual battery, bestiality, or sadomasochistic abuse. This is all of the weird sex things that Florida legislators could think of, I guess. and which is harmful to minors. Just throw that in there too. Some bestiality is great for them. I don't know what they were thinking, but okay. But they had to try and wrap it up and give the law some purpose, right? Okay, so it's harmful to minors. That's the real problem for it. Or B, any book which depicts nudity or sexual conduct, sexual excitement, sexual battery, bestiality, or sadomasochistic abuse. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Which is harmful to minors. What? What's the... Oh, okay. So, one is about pictures, and the other is about a book which might describe in written language, in words, any of those, that list of the weirdest things that the Florida legislature could think of. All right. Not all sexual conduct is considered harmful to minors. That's interesting. Rather, nudity or sexual conduct is only considered, quote, harmful to minors when it meets 3 specific criteria under Section 847.001. Now we get to know what they think is harmful. It is either A, predominantly appealing to prurient or shameful or morbid interest. B, is patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole with respect to what is suitable material or conduct for minors. And C, taken as a whole, is without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. And I don't know whether that's A and B and C or ors or what, but it sounds like we're going to start talking about Section C here, taken as a whole, is without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors, and that's probably where we're going to run into the problem. The Florida standard for harmful to minors mirrors the Supreme Court's narrow definition of obscenity known as the Miller test. The survey reveals that Florida schools are labeling numerous books, quote, pornography, that do not come close to meeting the legal definition. And again, think about who is a Florida man and a Florida woman and Florida persons of all kinds, and the things that they're very often reported in the news as being often found naked doing in the middle of a swamp somewhere. And it's difficult to know whether it's offensive to the prevailing standards of the adult community of Florida people. Anyway, here are some of the banned books, some of which you may recognize. First up, one book banned in Duval County is House and Homes by Anne Morris. It sounds porny, right? It is a 1995 book that is designed to teach children about the various types of structures in which people live. Wow, that is porny sexy. The author teamed with the photographer, Ken Hyman, or Heyman, I don't know which. Neither one is a fantastic pronunciation, to be honest. Heyman, who took photographs of different homes throughout the world. And, of course, everybody objects to the big vagina house, I guess. What's the problem? Well, here's the problem. The book was named one of the best books of the year by Parents Magazine. Listen to parents. Why aren't you listening to Parents Magazine specifically? So, why was this book banned from Florida schools as pornography? Well, if you saw the cover in front of you, you'd be able to guess. It's a National Geographic problem, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone of a certain age, I think, knows what that means. On certain pages, the photos capture a child's naked buttocks. It is a reflection of the culture where these children live. Here is one of the offensive images, and there it is shown, and it is a family with a very young toddler-age child whom they might be preparing to bathe, for instance, who is facing away from the camera, and there they are, the naked buttocks. Where's my naked buttocks music? There it is. Right. I mean, it could be anything. Anyway, here's another good sound effect for that.
Unacceptable!
Yes, exactly. Shrieking with horror that naked buttocks are shown. But a photo of a buttocks, is that right, is not, by definition, pornography. It's clear that this book does not predominantly appeal to prurient, shameful, or morbid interest. It is not patently offensive to most adults and has educational value for students. Oh, well, there's probably some music for that, too. Yeah, there we go. Sad trombone. Well, that's awful. Next up is The Sleeping Beauty. In this case, The Sleeping Beauty, I guess, as arranged by, as they might say in music, Tina Shart Hyman. That's, to be honest with you, first of all, the second Hyman of the day. And I'm sorry, apologies to Tina, but we're keyed in for prurient interest. SCHARTHYMAN. Okay. So Trina, what's wrong with your version of The Sleeping Beauty, the fairy tale? An illustrated version of the fairy tale, first published in 1977, which was a very pornographic year, if you think about it. The author-illustrator, I guess, is a four-time Caldecott Medal winner, by the way, for the best children's book of the year or whatever they awarded for. Well, here's the answer. It's awarded by the Association for Library Service to Children. That's some association name. And it goes to the most distinguished American picture book for children. And, some real classics have gotten it. And this is one of them. Why does a Florida school district consider this book pornography? Well, one illustration of the book shows a drawing of the Queen bathing from a distance. And you can see, once again, where's my music? Yeah, it's the same music because, of course, you're seeing is her illustrated naked buttocks from a distance. Okay, so, buttocks seems to be a big deal in Florida. And they are, as they are everywhere, but they're very upset about it. So no Sleeping Beauty because one of the illustrations has a pen ink watercolor rendering of some naked buttocks. This is obviously not a pornographic image, but nevertheless, the entire book has been classified as pornography and removed from the shelves. What's next? Guess what? Not a command to you, but that's the name of the book. It's actually titled Guess What by Mem Fox, M-E-M. I don't know what M-E-M might be short for something, but Guess What is a picture book in which the reader answers a series of questions to discover, quote, the personality and occupation of Daisy O'Grady, I guess the lead character of the book. At the conclusion of the book, readers learn that O'Grady is a pornographer. O'Grady is a witch. Wow, no wonder. Mem Fox is an Australian author who was honored as a member, get it, of the Order of Australia. Not the Order of Genitalia or anything porny like that. The member of the Order of Australia for services to children's literature. What a porny thing to do. There is no sexual content in the book. However, on one page, the drawing of O'Grady shows the character is taking a bath in a sink. Wow. Now, there aren't even so much as buttocks visible in this drawing, but it's a bath, and you know what kind of clothing you wear in a bath? None. And when you're wearing no clothing, that's pornography. According to Florida, the book has been deemed pornography by Duval County, Florida. Wow. Watch out for yourself in Duval County. Next up, Jelani and the Lock by Lorenzo Pace. This looks fairly harmless, but what's happening? Well, Jelani and the Lock is a fictional story of a boy who was captured in Africa and enslaved in America. Already controversial for other reasons. It's CRT. Help. I don't know where. What sort of, here we go. No, you can't have that. Right. Okay. Well, anyway. I don't know. I was looking for a sound effect of some kind to illustrate this one. He's captured in Africa, and we do say no to that. Enslaved in America. No, please. And ultimately wins his freedom. And then the white supremacists say no to that. It was named one of the best children's books for 2001 by the Los Angeles Porno Times and won the 2002 Skipping Stone Award for best pornography, I guess. It has been removed from the shelves of, again, Duval County schools because it was designated as pornography. The book contains absolutely no sexual content. That's underlined here. Thank you, Judd. It may be a reflection of the haphazard process used to classify and ban books. The report from the Florida Department of Education misspells the title and the author of the book, but it is unclear why the book should be banned for any reason. But there it is, Jelani and the Lock. And, well, I got a suggestion. If there's a misspelling of the author of the book, Lorenzo Pace, yeah, I'm not certain where that would go to. But Jelani and the Lock, if you could misspell one word, just change one letter in there and turn it into a pornographic problem, you know, wouldn't that be something if that was it? It doesn't say that that's the problem. And of course, the answer is changing it to Falani and the Lock. No, but I no idea. And I wonder, wouldn't that be something if that was just misspelled? And then people were like, well, obviously that's the content of the book. I'm not going to read it or take it from the shelf and look and say, that can't be the title of a children's book, Jelani and the misspelled Lock. It has to be something else, right? I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Now, we'll close this article out here, and I guess probably the entire segment, as it turns out, because this is a pretty outrageous story. Numerous counties in Florida have designated award-winning novels as pornography, quote-unquote pornography, and removed them from the shelves of classroom libraries. Banned titles include some other books, novels that you would likely recognize, and which have been controversial and the subject of banning fights for a long time. Beloved by Toni Morrison. Another of Morrison's literary works, also The Bluest Eye, has also been banned in Florida schools. But Beloved, of course, was the 1988 Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction. The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, the winner of the 2004 Alex Award, given annually to 10 books written for adults that have special appeal to young adults ages 12 through 18. That's porny all by itself. I don't know. Forever by Judy Blume. Judy Blume is always being picked on for this stuff. This one, of course, the book was responsible for Blume being honored in 1996 with the Margaret A. Edwards Award in recognition of her outstanding contribution to literature for young adults, and also porn, apparently. 19 Minutes by, why am I reading all the things will bring me an author's name that I can't pronounce? Jodi Picoult, perhaps? The book was named one of the outstanding books for the college-bound and lifelong learners in 2009. Got to get rid of that in Florida. Dreaming in Cuban by Cristina Garcia, which would be difficult ordinarily to ban in Florida, you would think. The book was named as a finalist for the National Book Award in 1992. And I guess it should be known that Ron DeSantis hates Cubans. You should just let everybody know that he pulled all the books about Cuba. You know, even if we're exaggerating a little bit, he is too, so it should be okay. And The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I'm hoping I've pronounced that name correctly. The book was named, that's a familiar name. The book was named one of the American Library Association's best books for young adults in 2000. But that's because libraries are porn repositories. And we have to ban librarians as well because they're so porny. All of these books contain sexual content and may not be suitable for elementary or even middle school readers in some cases, but that doesn't make them pornography. None of these books are appropriately characterized as pornography under Florida law because they do not predominantly appeal to prurient interests and they do, of course, have serious and artistic literary value for students. An adult who provides a copy of Beloved to a high school student is not committing a felony. And remember again, the stupid categorizations and definitions that Ron DeSantis gave, but then also the cover that he gave. Hey, the Florida law already bans pornography. Who disagrees with that? Well, you disagree with that because you are not reading or understanding the law in Florida or in the federal system for that matter. And you're miscategorizing these things as pornography, because you don't understand what the hell's going on. And you're not even looking. You just want to, some local lunatic Planned Parenthood moms said it was pornography, and you don't want to even look to see whether they're right because they might be wrong, and if you had to say so, then you would lose their support. So you just rubber stamp it, pornography, because you don't care, because you don't ever read a book in your life anyway, so you figure what's the harm if these kids don't read the book either. How many books have really been removed from Florida school libraries? In addition to the nature of the banned books, DeSantis is also grossly misrepresenting the number of books that have been removed from libraries across the state, and that's because the survey only includes books that have been permanently removed and excludes books that have been removed pending a full review. Since school districts are in the process of responding to laws and regulations imposed by DeSantis in 2022, most challenged books are still under review. The survey, for example, lists just 3 books that were banned in Escambia County. Escambia? I don't know how they say it. But according to data made public by the county's school district, at least 126 books have been removed from the shelves pending appeal. Don't panic, it's only 3, says Ron DeSantis. But if you go to the library there and you're looking for any one of these 126 titles, you will find them missing. So, what can you do? Well, you defeat him at the ballot box and make him look like a stupid idiot every day that you can until it's time to defeat him at the ballot box. Okay. Other fun things to share. Well, how about the fact that our first break is coming up? That is fun and exciting. And, all right, we got plenty to try and shoehorn in, and we can use the upcoming break. I can use the upcoming break to scan Joan's latest and greatest to see what we can chat with her about when she comes on in the 10:30 to 11 segment, and then we can be all prepared for that discussion. And I forget exactly what it was that we said last week that was definitely it's clearly going to be on the agenda this week, that we're still talking about the debt ceiling and the fact that we've made no progress to it. But I feel like we made some sort of prediction that by this week, but I think the prediction was, by this week, we'll find out that there's been no progress whatsoever and no resolution whatsoever to the most important problem, perhaps, facing the country in the last 10 years, because Republicans have no interest in solving it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Alright, welcome back. There we go. The third try. I'm starting to have more and more problems with this button. Usually that's a good sign that it's time to order a new microphone. But, well, we'll see. At any rate, by the way, checking in on what Justice was talking about earlier this morning about radioactive or glow-in-the-dark highways. It does, in fact, have to do with radioactivity. And to my surprise, the report is from, to my surprise, there's a report that substantiates this. And it is in the AP, which is not by itself surprising. Florida may study use, what's the point of studying anything in Florida? It's just going to be banned as pornography. But Florida may study use of radioactive waste in building roads. Like my idea on that would be, how good of an idea is it to build roads, or anything really, with radioactive waste? I would say bad. Based on the fact that radioactivity tends to hurt people. generally speaking. I mean, there's low-level radioactivity, high-level radioactivity, yes, sure, but you want to keep your exposure to radioactivity to a minimum if you can. What about if we put it everywhere? Oh, I would object to that just at the outset. But if you want to study it, I guess we can study anything, because I'm for studying. What's going on? Florida may study whether a radioactive waste byproduct of fertilizer production, I don't know if you knew that there was one, but there is, can be used to help build roads under a bill passed by the legislature. The proposal, which awaits a signature from Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, and it sounds stupid, so he might sign it, would task the state with conducting a study about the use of phosphogypsum, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, in road construction aggregate materials. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency requires that phosphogypsum be placed in, quote, stacks. That's what they call them. They resemble enormous ponds. There are some pictures here that do, in fact, look like enormous ponds, but I guess it's phosphogypsum instead. Florida has 24 such stacks, totaling about 1 billion tons of phosphogypsum, with 30 million new tons generated every year through the phosphate fertilizer mining industry. The EPA in 2020 approved the use of phosphogypsum in government road construction projects. Okay. I mean, I don't really know why they would do that, but then the answer lies, in the details of the sentence here. The EPA did that in 2020. And who was president in 2020? That idiot Donald Trump. So, of course, under Donald Trump, the Environmental Protection Agency says, yeah, you should absolutely build your roads out of radioactive waste. And lo and behold, when they put a normal person back in the presidency and I guess normal people running the EPA again, the EPA reversed its decision after Joe Biden took office. Now, I don't know. I don't know the particulars of it, and I guess the fact that it even came up as a question for the EPA to study means that it must be, I don't know, extraordinarily low-level radioactive stuff. There might be some reason they want to use this crap to build roads. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really seem to discuss this so far. But anyway, so now we know what they're talking about. And there's another paragraph or two which might help us figure things out. Environmental groups have warned about phosphogypsum spilling into waterways and elsewhere during storms, I guess from these stacks. A leak in March of 2021 at a stack called Piney Point resulted in the release of an estimated 215 million gallons of polluted water into Tampa Bay and caused massive fish kills. So I guess it's really not good for you. The EPA regulates phosphogypsum because the material contains radium-226, a naturally occurring radioactive substance that produces radon gas, which is a hazardous air pollutant. I know a bit about the radon gas. Yeah, if you have any of that, off-gassing into your house, you have to have a pump in the basement to try and keep it out of the air inside your home. And I guess I don't know what they're thinking. I guess they're thinking if they build roads with it, it's outside and it off gases into the outdoor air and diffuses and is, not horrible. But I guess it's doing that from the stacks anyway. And I don't know. Maybe they think, using it in road construction diffuses it even more instead of having these, I guess there's concentrated clouds of radon gas over the stacks or something. I don't know what the idea is. But, whatever. It's just a Florida kind of a thing. Interestingly, there are a couple of teasers for other articles down here that look actually pretty interesting and we might want to check in on. And one of them was on the Ohio Constitution overhaul that Scott alerted us to the other day. What was it? What was specifically there was? Oh, yes, brazen, right. What was a particular word that we had used twice that day that was in that one. This one, though, is news from Wisconsin, which sounds interesting. A judge who has ruled that Wisconsin's fake electors complaint must be reheard. This reported yesterday by Scott Bauer for the AP. And quick hit on this one. A Wisconsin judge said Monday he will order that the State Elections Commission reconsider a complaint filed against fake Republican electors who attempted in 2020 to cast the state's electoral ballots for former President Donald Trump. But this time, Dane County Circuit Judge Frank Remington said the commission must consider the complaint without the participation of one of its 6 commissioners. Why? Because one of the 6 commissioners who last time considered the complaint was also one of the fake electors. Oh, yeah, that's a problem. The Wisconsin Elections Commission, Republican Commissioner Robert Spindle, I don't know how he pronounces it, and those who brought the lawsuit ultimately all agreed that the complaint should be heard again without Spindle's participation. Given that agreement, Remington said during oral arguments on Monday that he would write a written order as soon as next week to vacate the commission's unanimous rejection in March 2022 of that complaint against the fake electors and require it to consider it again without Spindle. Of course, it was unanimous, but you never know how many of the people might have been persuaded to go along by Spindle's presence. We don't know whether he's some sort of weird Svengali-like figure. Surprise, surprise, I'm coming to the same conclusion as all parties have, that the appropriate remedy is to vacate the decision of the WEC and remand it back for further proceedings, which don't include Commissioner Spindle, Remington said. Wow, that was very sarcastic of him. Spindle is one of 3 Republican members of the commission that also has 3 Democratic members. It oversees elections in Wisconsin. That's kind of a weird sentence altogether, but okay. Madison-based liberal law firm Law Forward, that's an interesting name for a law firm even, filed a complaint with the Wisconsin Elections Commission in 2021 alleging that Republicans illegally posed as Wisconsin electors, they did, in an attempt to convince the U.S. Congress, that's right, to declare that Trump won the state in 2020, even though he in fact lost to President Joe Biden by about 21,000 votes. The complaint asked the Elections Commission to investigate the fake electors' actions and declare that they broke the law. The commission voted unanimously last year in a closed meeting to reject the complaint, saying that Republicans who attempted to cast the state's 10 electoral college votes for Trump did not break any election laws. Well, that's probably wrong. Spindle did not recuse himself from considering the complaint, even though he voted as one of the fake GOP electors. The Wisconsin Department of Justice concluded that Republicans were legitimately trying to preserve Trump's legal standing as courts were deciding if he or Biden won the election. That is the same argument that Trump allies and the fake electors from Wisconsin have made, including in testimony in the January 6th committee. Law Forward and Madison law firm Stafford Rosenbaum sued the commission and Spindle on behalf of Paul Sickle, executive director of the Service Employees International Union's Wisconsin State Council. Sickle also brought the original complaint to the Elections Commission. Way to go there. First name, where is it again? Paul. Nice job. Jeff Mandel, co-founder of Law Forward, said it was important to get a ruling making clear that no member of the Elections Commission considers complaints that directly involve them. That's a good rule all by itself. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again, Mandel said after Monday's hearing. There's not a vendetta or anything like that here. The case heard Monday is one of 2 pending lawsuits Law Forward has brought related to the fake electors. A judge earlier this year rejected another lawsuit against Spindle seeking records related to the consideration of the complaint. Why? I don't know. The other pending case in federal court alleges a conspiracy to overturn the election and seeks $2.4 million in damages from the 10 fake electors. Wow. And Trump attorneys Kenneth Chesebro and Jim Troupis. Chesebro we know. Jim Troupis, I think we've probably heard his name, but it's not as memorable as Chesebro. But I think we had a whole explainer at one point about Jim Troupis and his connections to the January 6th conspirators and state-level actors and the fake electors, and that he was a big deal in all of that. So, okay, interesting. Just so you know that that's still going on out there. Now back to our regularly scheduled pocket review. I appreciate the diversion. Thank you. And you never know, right? Justice, you point me to the crazy Florida radioactivity story, and And then the astute editors at AP know that they can pique my interest by invading my privacy and saving all of the things that I look at, so that they know exactly what stories they can prompt me with to get more clicks out of me. And something, artificial intelligence, Terminator, we all die. That's how that one ends. What else have I got for you? Well, someone who's always worth reading, Dahlia Lithwick. And I was trying to remember, who is this person that we always like to read? That's the answer. Slate's Dahlia Lithwick has something to say, and that usually means we should be listening, especially when it's about something we've been talking about for a while. Get this. This is an interesting headline. And she made an interesting pitch for it in social media, basically saying this is the most insulting, the latest development is the most insulting of the Clarence Thomas instances of corruption. And I wanted to see why I'm so insulted. And the answer lies in, which one is it that she's talking about? The answer lies in the headline. Harlan Crow sure isn't paying for your kids' school. And that could mean a lot of things, and it's very thought-provoking as a title all by itself. Of all that's come out of the past few weeks, this is perhaps, the subheader says, the most insulting. What is Dahlia's take on it? And if it's not what immediately came to mind when I read that headline, we'll double back, if I remember, and go over that one. Ready for this? Okay. In 1969, that wasn't yesterday, that was a long time ago. 1969, Justice Abe Fortas resigned his seat at the Supreme Court. And by the way, not everybody actually knows or remembers that. I mean, people who are of a certain age will remember it, or people who are of a lesser age than that, like mine. When I was like 1 year old, I guess at the time, or thereabouts. So I don't remember it, but I remember seeing this discussion because of my involvement in filibuster reform and the filibuster of federal judicial nominations in general. This definitely came up, as part of that general study of various outcomes with respect to judicial nominations and challenges to judicial standing, etc. At any rate, in 1969, Justice Abe Fortas resigned his seat at the Supreme Court for accepting $15,000 in exchange for a series of paid lectures at American University. Now, mind you, we just read the story the other day that over at George Mason University's law school, the Antonin Scalia Law School, they're doing this on the regular, and people are getting twice as much. They're getting $30,000 in exchange for a series of paid lectures, but in addition, they're also being flown overseas and put up in beautiful apartments in Italian cities, and basically given, like, as they said in the article, a bespoke a program designed for where they want to vacation, and then the school will just say, we have a campus there all of a sudden, at least for the period of time that you want to occupy it, we'll call that a campus, and all the students have to go there in order to learn from you, and you teach in the morning and you take the afternoons off, and your former clerks who are professors at our law school will teach the rest of the stuff. So, vacations and $30,000 on top of that in exchange for a series of lectures. Now, Abe Fortas resigned. They're saying it's perfectly fine, and not only should I stay in place, but I should be allowed to keep even more money. Part of the Fortas scandal also involved news of him accepting a stipend for doing legal work for a very rich friend, money he actually returned when the benefactor was indicted and before the outcry. That's somewhat interesting. None of Fortas's colleagues defended him for this, by the way. No one blamed the press or even the Nixon administration, which very much, it says here, it's linked, very much orchestrated the ouster. It was widely understood that Fortas had done something that undermined the public legitimacy and independence of the court, and that he had to go. Over the past few weeks, we have learned that Justice Clarence Thomas took multiple luxury vacations valued in the millions of dollars over many years, paid for by Harlan Crow, a billionaire GOP donor who has business before the court. We know Crow had also contributed the $500,000 in seed money that became Ginny Thomas's Liberty Central, which paid her salary. We also know that Harlan Crow purchased the home in which Justice Thomas's mother currently resides rent-free. And late last week, we learned that Crow paid years' worth of private, might be 2 years, but okay, it is years, worth of private school tuition for Thomas's grandnephew, Mark Martin, of whom Thomas had legal custody and whom Thomas was, as he put it, raising as a son. Justice Thomas knew such gifts needed to be disclosed because he did so with another tuition payment gifted to Martin in 2002, but he did not report the tuition that Crow paid. Last Thursday, we also learned that in January of 2012, Leonard Leo arranged to have Ginny Thomas paid $25,000 for consulting work through Kellyanne Conway's polling company. We did learn that. We read about it. The funds came from the Judicial Education Project, a dark money group that listed its address as a UPS store in Georgetown. Leo's instruction to Conway, and by the way, with so many billionaires involved, why can't they have a regular office? And the reason for that is if you spend money on a regular office, that's money you can't use to bribe justices or their wives. So you rent out a UPS store P.O. box and use the rest of the money for bribes, you see. It's good business. Leo's instruction to Conway asked her to funnel the cash to Ginny and took care to note that the paperwork should have, quote, no mention of Ginny, of course. A few short months later, the Judicial Education Project filed an amicus brief in Shelby County versus Holder, arguing for the dismantlement of the Voting Rights Act. Shelby County was a 5-4 decision, Justice Thomas in the majority. And by the way, that little notation of course, no mention of Ginny, of course, that's not me throwing in the of course sarcastically. That was a quote from the instructions to Kellyanne Conway. No mention of Ginny, of course, unquote. Anyway, the insult comic response to all of these revelations has been some sighing version of, quote, I sure wish I had friends like Harlan Crow, and I sure wish I had friends like Leonard Leo. The problem is most of the justices, and certainly most politicians and judges and people of generalized fanciness already do have friends like Harlan Crow. I mean, well, that's not a problem with it. I mean, I still wish I had them that way. I'm not one of those people. Wish I was, I guess. American governance is so inextricably bound up with capitalism and cronyism that the shocker would in fact be if justices didn't have a few friends who were the sort of wealthy political operatives who could buy them a pony or two on demand. And I mean, yes, at some level, let's face it, the people who become Supreme Court justices have got those connections. They don't always use them in the same way, but they definitely have those connections. Like, was there anything so spectacular or outstanding about any of the liberal justices on the Supreme Court? It's been a long time, really, since nominees to the Supreme Court were clearly outstanding jurists that everyone in the field recognized as just waiting their turn for a chance at the Supreme Court. And everybody kind of agreed. Love them or hate them, disagree with them or not. These are people who belong in the Supreme Court. Their intellect is just such that, and their influence is just such that they really are, destined for the high court. And, even then, even when that's the case, that's usually the case because they've been an outstanding member of one of the circuit courts or somewhere in the federal court system or, at the top of their game in the state court system, although it's been a million years since that was the case too. But an outstanding law professor, an outstanding, leader of legal opinion. I mean, quite honestly, Leonard Leo probably in that sense more qualified for the Supreme Court than some of the people he's been picking. But, in order to get to there's a million brilliant lawyers out there. In order to get to the point into the position where your name circulates in those circles, it's because you have a benefactor somewhere or some backers who are willing to cheerlead for you and whom other people are willing to listen to you when they do that. So, okay, you have to be able to play the political game to some extent, even if it's, doesn't necessarily have to be your primary focus. Anyway, yes, so American governments is so inextricably bound up with capitalism and cronyism that it would be a shocker if that were not the case, right? Which means the difference is not that there aren't other Harlan Crows out there. Surely there are. The difference is that most politicians and judges don't take millions of dollars worth of gifts and air travel and luxury vacations and rent-free housing and tuition payments from those friends. To the extent that they do, they disclose them. The problem with Justice Thomas is not that wealthy donors to institutions or organizations with interests at the court all want to be his friend. The problem with Justice Thomas is that he thinks that every single aspect of his life is private and that any scrutiny of these, quote, private affairs is an intrusion. Indeed, Leonard Leo swiftly defended his "no mentions of Ginny, of course" comment with a statement saying, "Knowing how disrespectful, malicious, and gossipy people can be, I have always tried to protect the privacy of Justice Thomas and Ginny." So that right there is the problem. It's not that Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo aren't free to pick who their friends are. It's that they happen to be in charge of spending a ton of money to use the courts to restructure democracy, and that they deliberately picked the friends who would help them do it. The problem is that everyone seems to have acceded to an arrangement in which those millionaire donors get to give stuff to their, quote, friends, and that this ought to be a secret, because otherwise it would compromise their privacy. If you are a justice, you have to disclose this kind of stuff. If that bothers you, if you are so committed to living a private life beyond the reach of disclosure, you can go be a urologist or something. Yes, you don't have to accept a seat on the Supreme Court, do you? Which is why the real answer to why you don't get to have rich friends like Harlan Crow is not that Harlan Crow wouldn't like you if he knew you. He probably would. It's just that Harlan Crow doesn't want or need to know you. His claim that he met Justice Thomas and found himself, quote, simpatico, has less to do with the nature of private friendship than with the nature of public power. And the way power currently works in this country is that you get to buy it. If you don't see the straight line between Citizens United, Leonard Leo, Shelby County, and the concerted effort to take power from regular you and give it to Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo, then you are not seeing the plan clearly. And remember, by the way, since there's the mention of Citizens United, that there's David Bossy, how did we decide to pronounce his name? And that he was at the, what was he, the founder of Citizens United? So he set this whole chain off, and they're inviting him to sit at the table with him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Fantastic. Anyway, there's also something specifically infuriating, Dahlia continues, about the way the defenders of the deep spiritual kinship between Harlan Crow and Clarence and Ginny Thomas root their argument in the fact that paying for an at-risk youth's private school tuition is a noble act, charity even. The problem with that is this is a conservative legal movement that is racing to subvert voting, public education, the administrative state, and, at present, the possibility of student loan forgiveness. So Harlan Crow's replacement of an entire New Deal safety net with an ad hoc charitable benefit system administered by himself and directed only at the offspring of personal friends who happen to be particularly powerful personal friends. Not all his personal friends got this benefit. That is specifically infuriating because the kids who receive the generosity of the Crow's private charity are not yours. And the kids who receive the protections of EPA regulations are not yours. And the kids who receive the benefits of going to schools where nobody will shoot them are not yours. The beauty of Leonard Leo and Harlan Crow is that they always get to determine who benefits. And guess what? Until and unless you are related to a sitting Supreme Court justice, it will not be you. The lesson we are learning from the new scandals at the High Court go way beyond ethics reform. This is no longer an ethics problem. This is a democracy reform problem. And it signals, first and foremost, an effort to deform democracy to serve the Harlan Crows and the Leonard Leos of the world. It also signals a view of democracy in which they will determine whose private life is private and who are the, quote, gossips. You may still know those gossips as journalists, she adds. Indeed, that's the latest defense that Thomas's allies have cooked up. His wealthy pals had to funnel the cash and lavish gifts to him and his wife in secret, because if they had done it publicly or disclosed it, regular people would cruelly intrude upon their cherished privacy with the unspeakable horror of public criticism. Leo raised this exact argument to explain why he concealed the payment to Ginny, which is akin to a crooked lobbyist saying he had to bribe the congressman in secret, because if people found out, that might tarnish his reputation. And if there is one thing we know about Thomas, it's that he views public criticism, at least of himself, as a profound evil to be avoided at all costs. Bending disclosure rules is, to his mind, perpetually justified by the desire, to shield his good name from any scoundrels who would dare speak ill of him. Whether or not he's adhering to the law is, at most, an afterthought. It would be painful in the extreme to have to confront the fact that your closest, dearest friendships are sometimes, in fact, almost wholly transactional. But that is not the issue that is up for debate just now. What is up for debate is whether justices exist in a sphere of privacy so impenetrable that neither disclosure rules, nor corruption concerns, nor journalism, nor accountability of any kind may intrude. That is the world Clarence Thomas and Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo have been building for themselves. Let me assure you, it is not a world that will admit you. They don't actually need friends like you. You and your kids are on your own. Well, that's a powerful point, as Dahlia Lithwick usually makes. I'm glad we added it to it. There was something else that came to mind in all of this, by the way, that the headline, Harlan Crow sure isn't paying for your kid's school. Not only just because he has chosen not to lavish his attention on you or your kids, but also, let's not forget that in all likelihood, given the fact that he's a billionaire, he's also probably avoiding millions and millions of dollars worth of federal and state income taxes as well. Although I don't know where he's living. Maybe there's no income tax there. But not only is he not lavishing gifts of tuition, he's not paying his taxes. All right, welcome back once again to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Did I get my point in before the music came in and the break started? In case I didn't. So just one more time, Harlan Crow not only not lavishing all of his largesse on you and your kids and their interest, if any, in private school tuition, but even if you have no interest in private school tuition, he's not paying, almost certainly not paying his fair share in taxes, which also means that he's not only not choosing to help you out with private school tuition, he's not even helping you out with paying his share of public school expenses. Now, you're on your own with that as well. I won't even pay my fair share into the generalized pot of money that helps pay for public schools in my area or for education programs at the federal level or what have you. And that's before we even get to the fact that he's also opposing any sort of forgiveness of student loans, as is Clarence Thomas, most likely, despite the fact that, hey, he has no private school tuition loans to worry about because billionaires are paying the private school tuition he's agreed to take on as his own. But never mind all of that. That was mentioned the other day, too. All right, so that's a good point, certainly. If I scroll back enough, will I find there is something I parked here from, a couple of weeks ago now that I passed over and that might now become relevant given the mention of the Fortis resignation. Yeah, there it is. When was this from? March 29th. And it's interesting, I guess, as far as the history of political machinations around the court, and that the possibility, or what should be the possibility of the discussion of Clarence Thomas's impeachment for all of this, or everybody else's for that matter. We never did finish all the details of the George Mason University situation. Maybe we can, I don't know, if I can get to pre-recording for Thursday and Friday, that might be a great time to get back to that. But here's another sort of historical footnote from the Washington Post, March 29th. James Robinault. I don't think I've ever called James Robinault out on these airwaves, except they're not airwaves. Here's the headline. Gerald Ford, you remember that guy, tried to impeach a Supreme Court justice and failed. That's true. He did fail at that. And so, maybe that's not the greatest example in the world. But in case, for all the people who are like, well, they never do that. When was the last time anybody tried to impeach a Supreme Court justice? That's why they won't do it on Clarence Thomas. It won't work on Clarence Thomas because Republican partisans won't allow it to happen, no matter how justified it is, no matter how squarely his case fits in the what would probably have been the idea of the founders about who should be impeached and why. But anyway, just a little background in history. We might as well throw it in there. That's what we can use the show for today. A member of Congress called for the impeachment of a sitting Supreme Court justice, complaining that the justice had supported the idea that violence and rebellion against the government may be justified under some circumstances. That sounds dangerous for this, MAGA day and age, but that's not what this is about. The member noted that the Code of Ethics for federal judicial officers, which included the concept of recusal in the face of conflicts or the appearance of impropriety, did not apply to the Supreme Court, so that the only recourse against this justice was impeachment. This was not April of 2022, but April of 1970. The speaker was not Ilhan Omar, but Gerald Ford, then House Minority Leader, and later, in case you didn't remember this, President of the United States. And the justice in question wasn't Clarence Thomas, but William O. Douglas, appointed to the court by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1939. The revelation by the Washington Post's Bob Woodward and Robert Costa of text messages from Thomas's wife, Virginia Ginny Thomas, to President Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, urging him to pursue efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, has occasioned a firestorm of criticism of Justice Thomas. And guess what? This was way before any of the rest of the scandals that have emerged about him that should result in his impeachment all by themselves. Many Democrats and liberal groups have demanded that Thomas, who refused to recuse himself in any of the election-related litigation, step down or be impeached. Historians immediately searched for a parallel, with most focusing on the only impeachment of a sitting justice in 1805. The justice was Samuel Chase, an intensely partisan opponent of President Thomas Jefferson. I don't know if you've ever heard of that guy. The House impeached him, but the Senate refused to convict and remove him. Yet, this impeachment, early in the Republic, has little to teach us about the precedent of seeking to dislodge a modern Supreme Court justice. Ford's speech in April 15th of 1970 is much more instructive in understanding the dynamics that might come into play should the House take up impeachment articles against Thomas. Yeah, right, but okay. Ford's speech came at the beginning of an era of hyper-partisan wrangling over Supreme Court nominations. Toward the end of Lyndon Johnson's term in June of 1968, 77-year-old Chief Justice Earl Warren sent a letter to the president saying he would step down once his successor was confirmed. Republican presidential candidate Richard M. Nixon's friends in the Senate immediately vowed to fight any effort by a lame duck president, Johnson had announced he wouldn't seek re-election, to appoint a new Chief Justice in the waning days of his administration. We've seen the ghost of that come back to haunt us as well. Of course, President Johnson, though, nominated liberal Associate Justice Abe Fortas to fill the Chief Justice position. Republicans and journalists began to dig up dirt on Fortas, mainly his connection to a financier named Lewis Wolfson, who was under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Remember in Dahlia Lithwick's piece, she made mention of the fact that Nixon had orchestrated this investigation into Fortas that ultimately led to his resignation. Why did it happen? It happened because Republicans wanted to prevent Johnson from replacing Chief Justice Warren in the last months of his tenure in office, and they figured that the best way to do it was whoever he nominates will destroy. And then time will run out, and Nixon, hopefully, from their point of view, will win the election, and he'll be able to make that nomination instead of the current Democratic president, if that scenario sounds familiar at all, because we've learned so much from our experience. Anyway, Fortas, as it turns out, had taken a retainer from Wolfson's foundation and was providing legal advice to Wolfson while on the court. Fortas, therefore, withdrew his name in October of 1968, but remained on the court. The Nixon forces smelled blood in the water and continued to investigate the Fortas-Wolfson relationship, eventually persuading Warren to pressure Fortas to resign. Nixon now would appoint both Warren's and Fortas's successors. Wow, that does sound familiar, doesn't it? Nixon's nomination of Warren Burger to become Chief Justice was not particularly controversial, but political payback for the Fortas ouster was in the air when Nixon tried to appoint a conservative Southerner to take Fortas's place. Nixon had campaigned against the liberal Warren court, especially on issues related to school desegregation and crime. Hey, that sounds familiar too. His hope was to turn the solidly Democratic South into the solidly Republican South, and he nominated Clement Haynsworth of South Carolina to replace Fortas. Recognizing the stakes, wow, I can't believe they recognized the stakes. The Democratic-led Senate voted down the Haynsworth nomination in November of 1969. Straight up vote, though, not a filibuster. Nixon then nominated another Southerner, Harold Carswell, an openly racist federal judge, because why not? And where was he from? Florida. Again, the Senate voted him down. Nixon angrily told the press it was clear he could not appoint a nominee from the South and settled on Harry Blackmun of Minnesota to fill the seat. It was in this context, it's just that there's a typo, but okay. It was in this context that scholars thought Nixon sent Ford to the House floor to seek retribution with the call for the impeachment of Douglas. Douglas had many detractors. How did Douglas get involved in all this? This is how. I mean, we forgot that this was about Douglas, not Fortas. Like Fortas, Douglas took money from questionable characters, some of whom had ties to the criminal underworld. His personal life, well, it's personal, leave him alone. No. His personal life was plagued with failed marriages, and he wrote and published a small book in early 1970 titled Points of Rebellion, which conveyed his thesis that armed rebellion against the government might be necessary to fight, quote, the establishment that increasingly was illegally surveilling and oppressing its citizens. Well, he has a point there. We must realize that today's establishment is the new George III, Douglas wrote. Whether it will continue to adhere to his tactics, we do not know. If it does, the redress, honored in tradition, is also revolution. I mean, that's actually now espoused as a conservative principle, by the way. Ford all but acknowledged in his speech that his attack on Douglas was prompted by the two failed nominations of Southern judges. Another member, Jimmy Quillen, Republican of Tennessee, was plain about it. Quote, perhaps after November, or when Justice Douglas is impeached, it will be possible for a Southerner to be nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court. It is about time. I'm sure he sounded like when he said it. Ford, a Yale Law School graduate, was also clear that he thought the standard for impeaching a justice was less exacting than that for an elected official. Less exacting. How do you like that? Citing the good behavior clause in the Constitution, Ford argued that judges were not appointed for life, but were subject to removal by impeachment. Well, I mean, I don't really understand what the difference there is, yeah, everybody's subject to removal by impeachment, but okay. Elected officials, he pointed out, were answerable to the electorate at regular intervals, which is why there have been so few successful impeachments of presidents, senators, and representatives. Judges, on the other hand, had been brought up on impeachment charges in greater numbers because that is the sole remedy for serious wrongdoing in office. It's actually not completely bonkers. Kind of an interesting analysis now that I think about it. In the end, Ford, who would come to know better than any elected official the arguments about what constitutes an impeachable offense, gave his guidance. The only honest answer, and this has been a part of my, my review of history and all along in all of this, the only honest answer, he contended, is that an impeachable offense is whatever a majority of the House of Representatives considers it to be at a given moment in history. Conviction results from whatever offense or offenses 2/3 of the other body considers to be sufficiently serious to require removal of the accused from office. This actually came up in my review of impeachment proceedings when I advocated for the impeachment of George W. Bush. Why? For that illegal and unwarranted surveillance program that Douglas was saying might one day warrant armed revolution. And taking Benjamin Franklin's advice that the only alternative to the historical method of removing corrupt tyrants from power, revolution/assassination, was less preferred than the more refined solution that the Constitution afforded us, impeachment from office. But of course, if certain parties were going to block it on a partisan basis, well, then there might be resort to these other solutions. And you ought to get out of the way if you prefer the peaceful, orderly transition of legislative impeachment to violent revolution or assassination. Anyway, that came up when I thought perhaps Douglas's concerns about surveillance are well-founded and amply demonstrated in the George W. Bush administration's use of warrantless wiretapping and other illegal surveillance techniques. Anyway, that's when, what's wrong with that? Or what's wrong with what W did? And he's just protecting the country and and besides which, is that really a high crime or misdemeanor? Does that qualify? And the answer is when Republicans consider whether or not someone is worthy of impeachment, they simply state the obvious, that it's the prerogative of the House to decide what constitutes an impeachable offense. And if they say it is, then it is. And that's just the bottom line reality. He was, his Yale law school training enabled him to see that, and I can't disagree. Back to the article. The attempt to impeach Douglas failed. Like many things in American history, the story took a backseat to crises that enveloped the Nixon presidency at the time. On the day Ford spoke, 3 Apollo 13 astronauts were struggling to get back to Earth in their crippled spacecraft, so probably all eyes were there. 2 weeks later, Nixon invaded Cambodia to clear out North Vietnamese sanctuaries. Days later, Ohio National Guard members shot and killed 4 students at Kent State University, so there were a couple distractions involved. Today's hurricane of crises may cause people to move on from the Ginny Thomas text scandal, but if and we did. We moved on to other Ginny Thomas scandals, but we forgot this one. But if Democrats do pursue impeachment of Clarence Thomas, history suggests political payback could be a top motive. I don't know about that. Democrats are still looking for a reckoning for the Merrick Garland snub and the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett in the days before the 2020 election. This is really a disservice to this whole argument, honestly. A Thomas impeachment would probably fail in the Senate, but it might satisfy the need for political revenge and keep a spotlight on the January 6th Capitol riot and events surrounding it. Well, I would suggest that undermined the whole premise of everything that he said, but I guess you should look for Republicans to react that way, certainly, and I guess get support from, loose-lipped people like James Robinault, who I had never called out before, and now I have, and it doesn't come out that well for him in the end. But there you have it. That's true. That's exactly what they'll say. By the way, maybe the reason we've never called his name before is he's not a regular writer at the Washington Post, but a contributor. And here's his little bio. James D. Robenalt is the author of The Harding Affair, Love and Espionage During the Great War, and January 1973, Watergate. What is this? Okay, here's the quote. Okay, the name of the book here also, or second book, January 1973, Watergate, Roe versus Wade, Vietnam, and the month that changed America forever. He's chosen at least 2 months that have changed America forever. There were a lot of things going on back then. He practices law in Cleveland at Thompson Hine LLP. And obviously doesn't practice much in the way of politics because, like I said, he exploded the whole premise of everything he had to say about these being really necessary and proper impeachments that will have to overcome political inertia, but instead undermines the whole thing and says, oh, by the way, you can dismiss it all as political revenge. Thanks a lot. That was actually quite astoundingly stupid as a way to end the article. Anyway, let me jump back up here and add a couple other items before we hear from Joan. And gosh, there's a lot. Let's try. Let's do this one because this may interest Joan as well. I have made a tour of a couple of states in the union, collecting the stories of state legislators making brave stands against, well, in most cases it has turned out to be against state level abortion ban legislation, where we read the story in Nebraska of a single state senator saying, hell, I will, this was actually over trans rights, not abortion rights, but between trans rights and abortion rights, we find a lot of legislators standing up and saying, I'm going to use whatever state level filibuster powers are available to me to put my foot down and say no, at least to this bill. But in Nebraska, we found all bills were going to be filibustered unless they withdrew this anti-trans legislation. And we made stops in a couple of other states where people were doing the same, stops in other states where Democrats were under threat of expulsion from the body because Republican supermajorities were angry that they even existed. All sorts of things. And now a stop in an unlikely place. Although when it comes, this is one of the important points of all this. When it comes to abortion rights, it turns out that there isn't any place in America where it's unlikely to find even conservative champions when the chips are down and really push does in fact come to shove and it's all on the line, where even Republicans won't stand up and say, actually, most people want to guarantee that there is some access to abortion services for all sorts of people for all sorts of reasons. Some are more restrictive about it than others, but the idea of a total ban has only support among a tiny, tiny minority. And usually people who don't and won't ever need personally abortion services, though it may turn out that people important to them in their lives either will need them or in fact have needed them and have availed themselves of those services, but now they're finished with them and they want to pull up the ladder behind them for political purposes and make it look like they always oppose it in every case except the ones where they really needed it. So where's the next supposedly unlikely place? The answer is South Carolina. That is unlikely. That's true. More unlikely still, the coverage is from the New York Times, and I'm sure that there's some local coverage about it. And we probably should have tried to turn that up, but I'm out of time to do that research, and I have this story. And the New York Times usually does a good job of presenting these things. But I guess as the situation rolls on, we may find occasion to use some local sources about this one. But here we are with the glowing profile version of the story. The unexpected women blocking South Carolina's near total abortion ban. And I guess that's a loaded headline too. It should be expected that women will block anybody's near total abortion ban. But of course, it shouldn't fall entirely to them. It just does because in the main, it turns out that when you're talking about a Republican-dominated, supermajority Republican legislature, and when you talk about the men who constitute that supermajority for the most part, they also tend to be people who willingly go out of their way not to know or understand anything about the subject. Anyway, it's also unexpected because it's in South Carolina. It's also unexpected because the majority of them, and there's only 5 of them involved in this, but the majority, that would be 3, are Republicans. And though we learned, that even in overwhelmingly Republican states, as it turns out, the women there and the electorate in general do in fact support retaining access to abortion services when they actually ask the electorate yes or no, which is why increasingly Republicans are trying to block the ability of the electorate to answer that question or even to be asked that question in the first place. That's what we were learning about in Ohio the other day. Well, anyway, here's the South. When they are asked, they say no to these total bans. So it should be expected everywhere. But here we are, the unexpected women blocking South Carolina's near total abortion ban. They call themselves the Sister Senators, and 3 of them are Republicans. What's the story? Let's ask Kate Zernike. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, Zernike. And, thanks, Kate. What do we got? When the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last summer, advocates on either side presumed that the country would divide along the bright color lines, red states completely banning abortion, blue states protecting it. That prediction failed to anticipate the Sister Senators and a lot of other people too, but this is a story about the South Carolina folks. The sisters, as they call themselves, are the women in the South Carolina State Senate, the only women. 3 Republicans, 1 independent, and 1 Democrat in a legislature that ranks 47th, not surprisingly, among states in the proportion of women. So, the unstated, it's kind of stated, but the unstated overtly point here is every woman in the South Carolina State Senate opposes this total abortion ban. Every single one, Democrat or Republican. Problem is there's only 5 of them. But that's enough to do the trick for now. As a bloc, they are refusing to allow the legislature to pass a near total ban on abortion despite a Republican supermajority. They're not going as far as is the case in Nebraska and saying there will be no other legislation considered in this session until you drop this bill, but it seems to be an effective tactic nonetheless. 3 times in 8 months, Republican leaders in the chamber have tried to ban abortion beginning at conception. That's it. There's no such thing as abortion in South Carolina, is what their hope is. 3 times the women have resisted, even as fellow Republicans have threatened primary challenges and anti-abortion activists have paraded empty strollers and groups of children heckling the women as baby killers. Yeah, the usual tactics. Before the most recent debate started in April, the anti-abortion group Students for Life dropped off gift bags at the offices of the 3 Republican women containing plastic spines, infant size, but intended to encourage the women to grow one, with notes signed, quote, the preborn. They've elected themselves to speak for the preborn. The women filibustered, taking the gifts to the podium on the Senate floor to declare themselves even more firmly in resistance. Good job, Students for Life. I've got one hell of a spine already, but now I've got another backup, Senator Katrina Shealy said, flanked by 2 other Republican women, all holding their plastic spines like trophies. After 3 days of debate, during which the women spoke for as long as 4 hours each at a time, Senate leadership acknowledged again that it did not have the votes to pass the ban. I don't think the Republican Party saw us coming because we didn't do what they thought we were going to do. Ms. Shealy, the senior member of the group, said in an interview with the other women around a table in her state house office. They thought we would just do what they told us to do. But as men argued that abortion was killing babies, the 5 women insisted that abortion bans are about controlling women and that they will not be controlled. They have argued the ban reduces women to, quote, baby machines, like the dystopia of The Handmaid's Tale, and rejected as ludicrous claims from male legislators that women use abortion as birth control. How old is that claim? I don't believe any woman goes out on a Friday night and has sex and gets pregnant so she can have an abortion the next day, Ms. Shealy said, and of course no one does. The debate in South Carolina, a deeply red state where abortion, for now, remains legal up to 22 weeks. They have like the actual, what used to be the ban all over the place, but haven't gotten around to one of the shorter bans yet. So that's pretty amazing all by itself. Well, that shows how much has not happened according to plan now that overturning Roe has made abortion bans a reality rather than a symbolic gesture or a plank in a party platform. Many Republican-controlled states have outlawed abortion, largely through bans triggered by the Supreme Court decision in June, but states that were expected to have not, stopped by voters in ballot measures in Kentucky and Kansas, Republican legislators here and in Nebraska, or courts that have blocked it elsewhere.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I didn't realize how far into our break we were when Joan called in. Good morning, Joan's with us. Hey, how you doing, by the way?
I am doing well. I'm doing much better.
Yes,
Fine.
you sound mostly recovered there and back on your feet. No more residual. Any allergies coming on?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that'll come too. But okay. All right, all seems to be going well, and our connection is good, so that's nice. And let's I'll save the rest of some of the commentary perhaps on what's going on in South Carolina among the Republican and now I guess multi-partisan, because there's an independent involved, but the 5 and only 5 Republican legislators in the, I guess, the South Carolina Senate, the only women in the whole body, as it turns out. But another great story and another great example of just how widespread real life examples of red states, you know, when they have the opportunity once again to catch the car after all of their barking and chasing, can't actually produce a abortion ban because the people there don't actually want it. It's very interesting.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been asking the question and paying millions of dollars over decades, asking people in polls, do you really want this thing? And the answer is no. And Republicans have insisted, no, the answer is actually yes. And weirdly, they remain not only a viable national political party, but hold supermajorities in a number of states. And all the rest of their program is actually extraordinarily unpopular as well. And yet we only have, two parties to choose from, and one of them insists that the people are stupid and should shut the hell up already. And they say we're closely divided as between that party and the other one, the one we like. Wow. Okay. Well, it's a weird situation, to say the least. But all right. Now we can turn focus to other things. I have your diaries page opened up here. But
you do? What do I have on my
So let's see.
page?
Up at the top, and let me refresh, because you never know. You might have published like 6 things since 8 this morning.
Well, we have a new system, so things don't get quite as fast as they used to.
All right.
So.
Well, tops at the, you know what? Actually, the top story did change. When I opened it in the morning, it was the Republicans lock arms to take us over a financial cliff story. Or no, or maybe it was this one. It was. If Dems don't expand SCOTUS, it'll be 2065 until the next liberal majority. That was alarming enough as it is. And that was at the tops. But now tops is red flags raised over Clarence Thomas disclosures going back to 2011. So what's your top focus for the morning?
Well, my top focus for the morning has actually been the debt ceiling, because that's happening. But we've always got Thomas.
Yes.
Hanging out there in the background.
True. And I got a chance to discuss a little bit about Thomas, and I read Delia Lithwick's latest on that, which I thought was interesting. She's making a good point in the headline. Like, the real problem here is, in addition to the ethics problem and the fact that Thomas seems to think that actually his privacy, or whatever he thinks of as his privacy, is more important than anybody else's conception of ethics. And that it's actually the real problem in Thomas's mind is you've found out about this thing. That's the real crime. And, not the things he's been taking from people. But the headline was kind of interesting, just in pointing out Harlan Crow isn't paying for your kids' schools.
No.
That's definitely the case. And for it made a lot of good points, like, for all the Republicans screaming about, well, we should have low taxation or no taxation at all. Taxation is theft. And to the extent that people need help in this country, you ought to rely on private charity. As it turns out, when you rely on private charity, billionaires pay for kids to go to school if they're the kids or guardians of Supreme Court justices that decide cases in their favor. That's where charity goes. But also the unstated point of he's also not paying for your kids to go to school, i.e. he's not paying any taxes anywhere, most likely, or at least not his fair share. And for the rest of you suckers who depend on public schools like I do, screw you, because I won't even pay a couple of cents a year to send your kids to school, or maybe feed them lunch as well. All my money goes to helping my friends send their kids to private elite boarding schools instead. So That was kind of interesting.
There was, that reminds me of a story that The Intercept had that I hadn't seen much follow-up on. That Crow has he has a passport for, I can't remember which Caribbean nation that is the big tax dodging place.
Oh, yeah,
so
let's see.
This is a thing among millionaires and billionaires to buy passports from, and I can't remember which country.
Yeah, let me see. I'll see.
To have the dual citizenship to be able to avoid paying taxes.
Mm-hmm. St. Kitts
I haven't
and Nevis.
seen more reporting on that, but
okay. Yeah, that's interesting all by itself, right? So, I'm just a great patriot. I'm just a great patriot who has dual citizenship with a country that's, kind of, it's not that it's a fake country, but my citizenship is kind of fake.
Yeah.
In case I decide to hell with this place, I don't want to pay them any money.
I haven't followed up on that one.
Wow.
So, but that's the one wrinkle that we've got in trying to go to Harlan Crow's taxes to try to figure out, has he declared everything? How big are his gifts to Thomas? How big of a sugar daddy has he been? He might have been filing any taxes on any of this. So
yeah, great. So
that's one of the wrinkles out there.
So as it turns out, it's St. Kitts and Nevis is where he's landed. I was wondering, because there's a lot of Caribbean countries that kind of do that, because I mean, I guess I don't fault them too much. We don't have any money.
Right.
I don't know. We'll give you a passport. Sure.
Right.
What do we care? You're probably never coming here.
Probably do more with his money than Thomas.
Yeah. I mean,
that's helpful to people.
Somebody's taxing this guy. It's just St. Kitts and Nevis. Yeah. So that's good. I was wondering whether it was Dominica.
Which is to say that, not only is he not paying for your kids' schooling, he's probably not paying for anybody's. Who knows if he's paying any property taxes to help, pay for public schools.
Almost certainly not, or at least as little as he can, and it's not nearly enough or proportional to what, you're paying.
And given it's Texas, it probably wouldn't be anyway.
Yes. I mean, in terms of local taxation, true.
Yeah.
But, there's all sorts of things that he could be paying for, like, I don't know, national defense or being an awesome patriot. Right. But to hell with that, too. That's your problem.
What this story from 2011 sort of demonstrates, and other things that we've seen from Thomas, disclosures that he has made, it's not a question of Thomas not understanding what needs to be disclosed.
Well, we hope not. I mean,
he knew that, Ginny's income had to be disclosed. In one case, he disclosed the gift from somebody else that wasn't Harlan Crow, $5,000 that went toward his kids' tuition.
Yes.
So why would he declare that and not Crow's? There have been instances where other gifts he's disclosed, but not Crow's. So it's not the excuse that, somebody told me I didn't have to. I didn't entirely understand. That's bullshit.
Yeah. Well, that's probably true. I wonder whether it's their direction, like the guy who gave him the $5,000 for tuition at one point, was just a regular-ish guy. I mean, I'm sure it matters that he had enough money to just give $5,000 to Thomas for tuition for nothing. But I think it was like, had an exterminating business or something like that, and was probably proud to support Clarence Thomas's lifestyle and to say so, whereas Harlan Crow might have said, listen, I want you to keep this secret. So he did.
Yeah.
It probably was that. He just did the bidding of the person who gave him money. It wasn't even a Clarence Thomas decision, like, I want to guard my privacy. The guy who gave me the money said he wanted to guard his privacy, so I guarded it. Illegally, but I did
that's
it.
Probably very likely.
Yeah, that was the note that we read about that when he funneled money through the whatever the hell judicial.
Right, Leonard Leo funneled the money through Kellyanne Conway's polling shop.
Right. Please don't disclose this.
Ginny Thomas for I don't know what.
Right.
Just don't put her
be a
name
nice
on
person.
it was the thing.
Right. So when donors tell Clarence Thomas, don't disclose my name, he complies. Which, raises other questions about what else do they tell you? And what else do they tell you not to tell anybody? And how often do you comply? So,
Lots of questions about Clarence.
Yeah.
John Roberts insists don't have to be answered because, we all comply with the non-existent ethics rules
Yeah, we
are supposed to abide by.
Or we don't. I don't know which.
Or we don't.
It's one of those two things. But the point is, don't ask that question. And if you do, we won't come and answer it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Great. So that's nice.
Nice because they can still get away with it. And there aren't a lot of things that Congress can do about it right now. The Senate can keep asking questions, and that's really the only thing that they can do. Senate Judiciary, Mark wrote this story this morning, I haven't read it yet, sent a letter to Harlan Crow demanding lots and lots and lots of disclosure for all of the gifts he's made.
No. It's a good demand.
Wyden in the finance committee has done the same. Wyden has a little bit more push here, I think, in terms of his committee, because his committee can get IRS records. Provided that there are any from Crow.
Well, yeah, there's that. Or he thinks he can get IRS records, because remember what happened to the last Democrat who was pretty sure that the law allowed him to get IRS records. It took 4 years to get them.
It took 4 years to get them, but we have that Supreme Court precedent now.
Yeah.
Saying, well, yeah, of course you can. So
Now they're like,
that's
was that our precedent? Shoot. Let's undo that one.
Yeah.
That's no longer good. Maybe.
So there we are.
That's
what Democrats can do is
it's pretty amazing.
This is it. Just keep beating the hammer that Thomas is corrupt, and by extension, he's making the Supreme Court corrupt. And
see if anybody cares, I guess. Yeah.
The Republicans, by embracing him, are thus corrupt. And, that's really the only thing at their disposal right now. Thomas isn't going to resign.
No.
At this point, he's dug in completely, and he's got Roberts allowing him to.
Yeah.
He's not going to be impeached. He deserves to be impeached. He is a textbook case as much as Trump was for impeachment.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen. So here we are.
So, yes. So I guess we wait and see what develops and whether there's any critical mass level that you can reach. I mean, I don't think so. But that would change Republican minds about it. But anyway, I guess we have to...
No, why would they? They've got it made. They've got their pet court.
Yeah. Well, that's not so great.
It's not so great.
To be honest.
And it's really not great that we still don't have a majority sitting in the Judiciary Committee.
Oh, yeah.
The committee that can do stuff, because we still don't have Dianne Feinstein back, and we still don't know exactly when she's going to be back.
Right. Well,
But we're pretty sure she's not going to step down, because she sent out a statement at the end of last week or the beginning of this week saying, I'm on my way back.
Oh?
Just with no date attached to that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess from one perspective, I guess you could say maybe she's sitting there saying, "Whoops, Clarence Thomas isn't going to resign. Neither am I. No matter what, he's corrupt. I'm just, ill." So, well, at least she's on her way back. I don't know.
Maybe it would be
goodness.
handy to have her back for the debt ceiling situation, however it ends up being resolved.
That would be nice. Come on back.
By June 1st.
June 1st. Okay. Is that...
We're down to like 5 days in which both the House and Senate are scheduled to be working this month. And we've got Biden heading off, I think, next week for travel to Japan and Australia.
Oh.
So,
well, okay.
Things are looking a little bit scary there.
They can negotiate by Zoom.
They can.
Right?
They can.
So why not? I'm sure they have a secure one. Not that there's anything to negotiate about, because the other guys aren't showing up with any proposals of any kind. So he can tell them what he's thinking of doing in the absence of anything
and indeed,
real.
he's going to do that today at, I think, 4:00.
All right.
I don't know that the time has been absolutely set, but the four corners, as they call them, in Congress are going to be meeting with Biden this afternoon. And
have they abandoned the gang of construction?
No, it's
just four corners.
McCarthy, Jeffries, Schumer, McConnell.
Yeah, I mean, I think they used to just say that was a gang of four, but that was, I don't know. All right.
Four corners, big four. Corners. They call them all sorts of things.
Huh. All right. Well, the four is consistent. We at least have that.
Yes.
All right. So they can
we've got
work
McConnell and McCarthy essentially representing the Freedom Caucus, because that's the plan that passed in the House, and that's the one McConnell says he's sticking to.
At least I think last week he had said like he was not committing to anything or any work of any kind on this subject.
That was pretty much what he said, and then Mike Lee got a letter together to Schumer that McConnell and 41 others signed on to, saying, nope, no clean debt ceiling. We won't We won't allow a clean debt ceiling.
So all he said was he wouldn't really be leading in any so he's following just fine, but he's not
digging
taking
his
a leadership
heels
position.
in just fine with McCarthy.
right.
Essentially, it's a united front with McCarthy. You get these spending cuts or nothing. Or,
Okay.
we go into default, and either way, we're going to wreck the economy on your watch. That's the promise.
I guess so, and that I guess is what you're talking about in the headline of your Republicans lock arms to take us over a financial cliff story from yesterday. This
Yes.
must be this is the locking.
Either we go into default and blow up the entire global economy, or we impose these budget cuts that will lose hundreds of thousands of jobs and dry up all sorts of budgets.
Right. And I think
and it's been interesting watching how this has evolved. One of the first things the Democrats hammered on when the bill was passed was how much it was going to cut veterans benefits, veterans health care in particular, which is a big spending category. McCarthy had to come out and say, "Oh, that's a lie. That's a lie. Show me in the bill where it says we're cutting veterans." Of course, they don't put any specifics of anything that's being cut in the bill because that made it too easy to say, "Look what they're doing."
right.
But if extrapolating, if you make these major cuts in the budget, this is what is going to happen. 22% from this program and this program and this program and this program. Anyway, after all the focus on veterans, McCarthy came out and said, okay, along with defense and border security and veterans, those are the things we're holding sacred. Oh, and Social Security and Medicare. We're not going to cut any of those things. It's everything else. All the discretionary budgets for everything else that's on the table.
Which only raises the number you have to cut there.
If you take all of those things right out of the mix, Homeland Security, defense, veterans, Social Security, Medicare, everything else has to be cut by 51% in the next 10 years.
Hey, that sounds plausible. Just slash the budget in half. Why don't you just do that? Yeah, okay. Well,
and that's what McConnell and 42 other Senate Republicans have essentially signed on to. It's the Freedom Caucus bill, which is kind of a problem, Axios says, and they do get the gossip.
So they might even be
for
right.
some moderate Republicans who McCarthy supposedly promised wouldn't have to stand behind this symbolic bill. No way was this going to become law, he supposedly told them. So go ahead and vote with me. Give me this win. Give the House Republicans this win so we have something to take to Biden. You don't have to worry about it actually happening. While at the same time, the Freedom Caucus was saying, you promised us this is what we're getting, that you will not back down from these cuts. This is what you promised us. So this is the problem McCarthy has actually in the House in getting anything done. And I think that's why Biden is feeling pretty safe in his no-holds-barred position, that he's not going to give in, because he thinks probably that there's going to be a break with moderate Republicans. And that's why tomorrow he's going to one of their districts.
Oh.
He's going to Westchester County in New York.
I see.
Where a freshman Republican is representing a district that voted for Biden in 2020. So he's going to be putting some direct pressure on them, which I think is the smart way to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little room for, finding anything to do here, as you can see, that painted into the corner of having to fake negotiate with a group that doesn't know what its real demands are going to be, and we don't know where the fault lines will, if any, will show themselves. But I guess most likely, if they're going to happen anywhere, I guess it'll happen among the people who style themselves moderate Republicans and who represent districts where there's a significant number of Biden voters. Okay.
Right.
But
and they already got some concessions. not all of them necessarily. Certainly, some farm state Republicans did with the ethanol stuff. They got amendments made in the Rules Committee before the thing came to the floor, and that's another problem for various infighters in the House.
Yeah.
Is that, this was supposed to be a no backroom deals, no middle of the night dealing. This is the bill we're going with, and then this group of lawmakers from Iowa and other places said, you know what? If you cut those ethanol subsidies that are in in that IRA thing you're trying to repeal, we've got a problem. We're not going to do that. So we've got the concession making already in place.
Any Nebraskans, any corn huskers involved?
Are we going to have corn husker kickbacks?
Yeah.
We might just have corn.
I mean, isn't that what it is? You don't have to be from Nebraska to be a husker of corn, certainly. But I know, they get first dibs on the designation of corn husker. But I would guess that there's probably a couple of Nebraskans involved in that.
I think there probably are. So they're happy with the bill. They got those concessions, but
outrageous.
It shows that McCarthy will bend.
Yeah,
it shows that McCarthy will break, and that makes pressuring other moderate Republicans, if you can call them that, and I don't think you can, but it's again a problem of, do we have enough adjectives for describing Republicans? We don't.
Yeah,
anyway, the ones who aren't Freedom Caucus.
All right. Well, and we'll see whether there's just, I guess eventually that you wonder whether that just breaks out in fist fights in conference gatherings at some point. You're the ones that are making us all look bad.
We almost saw it on the floor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm pretending like that's a rarity, and no, it's not. Okay. Well, we have until June 1st to find out exactly what path we'll take, and or what kind of path we'll take.
June 1st-ish.
Yeah, I guess they could declare it. They could stretch things out, and I'm
maybe
sure that's what.
8. Maybe. It feels like right now the likeliest thing to happen is a temporary increase, a temporary suspension.
I see. Okay.
That's what my gut says.
Yeah, that's a good guess, really. They won't come up with a solution in 5 days together. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So,
there's another little wrinkle happening that's sort of interesting. I don't know what will come of it and if it could come of it in time, but the National Association of Government Employees has filed a lawsuit in federal court in Massachusetts saying, by the way, this statute is unconstitutional.
The
debt ceiling
statute? Oh, okay.
Statute,
Interesting. All right.
Because it gives the president an insolvable constitutional problem. The Constitution says the debt of the United States can't be questioned.
Right. Yeah.
He can't declare unilaterally because the law says he can't. The statute says he can't. He can't lift the debt ceiling himself. But at the same time, he has the constitutional obligation to pay the debts that Congress has incurred. Mm-hmm. So this puts him in a constitutional quandary, and you can't have that. Either you pay the debts as the Constitution tells you, or Congress allows that, and there isn't wiggle room, they say. So it's unconstitutional.
All right. Yes.
Yellen has said she's telling Biden he can't do that unilaterally. He can't take what some scholars have called the least unconstitutional option of following the directive of ignoring Congress and paying the debts. Says that creates a constitutional crisis. Biden can't do that.
Well,
I'm advising that he don't do that.
Okay.
But if a court steps in and says, you know what, these government employees have a good point. You've got a Constitution in conflict here. So you have a statute in conflict with the Constitution.
Well, that's I mean, it is a good point. And I mean, I don't know where, I think all the options, whatever direction they go, creates a constitutional conflict. So I don't know why Yellen's particular preference is any better than any of the others.
I don't either. But I think that's,
we like you.
They just have her being the one saying it because Biden doesn't want to go 14th Amendment, which I think he should personally. But, I'm also the person who said, Democrats, you really need to do this in the lame duck session before House Republicans take over, because when they say they will crash the economy, they mean it.
Yes.
And nobody ever listens to me. So.
Right. Well, you know how that is. And, of course, they all had plane tickets. They had to leave.
Right.
We hear you. You're right. But, a Valentine's Day dinner, whatever it is, gets in the way. A lot of important things.
Joe Manchin. We always had Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin. He didn't want to do it because, of course, he needed to remain viable as a quasi-Republican to be around to lose to a real Republican in the next election. So
right.
Yeah. The big payoff for all of his equivocating is going to be that all of the concessions that he made as a strategy to win re-election won't work. So no point in being a Democrat for the hell of it for the last couple of weeks, right? All right.
Basically.
Well, we'll see whether that changes his mind. So, all right, we wait again. And next Tuesday, we come back and say, well, now there's only 3 of those 5 days left or whatever it is. And, I mean, no one's going to reveal, I imagine, their ultimate position until June rolls around, I guess. It would be an interesting and refreshing tactic to say, nope, this is it. This is the strategy. This is what we're doing. Don't ask me again. But all right, well, so far I think there'll be a currency still next Tuesday, and I guess for 1 or 2 more Tuesdays. So
we should be okay for next week.
So while there's currency, donate to all the Democratic candidates that are in need, and Daily Kos itself, of course, and hey, Netroots Radio as well. And if you feel like it, Clarence Thomas, but I don't recommend
we
it.
still got the money. I'm sure he'd do something nice for you in the court.
That would be the ultimate payback. Oh, by the way, all the millions you got from Harlan Crow are worthless now, but he's already enjoyed the vacations. So. All right. Well, thank you, Joan. We'll check in next Tuesday and see if there are still dollars.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right. Time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam so you can listen to all of the news with him on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's up on tap? Radical right-wing mass violence sits dangerously close to Republican politics. In fact, they're part and parcel and overlap entirely. Some Venn diagram is a circle. Next.